The theft happened between the soup and the fish course, as quiet and shocking as a snake in a sunlit garden. Ashwood Manor, that enormous monument to old money and showy taste, was in the middle of one of its famous weekend parties. The air in the dining hall was thick with the smell of polish, hothouse gardenias, and expensive perfume. Candlelight flashed off silver and crystal and warmed the dark wood of the walls. At the head of the long table, the host, Sir Alistair Finch, held everyone's attention. His loud laugh bounced off the portraits of his sterner ancestors as he waved a hand boasting a huge ruby ring. It was a picture of perfect, civilized comfort, which made what happened next even more brutal. The star of the show in every sense was the Star of Kashmir. It sat on a little stand of rosewood in the middle of a sideboard, resting on black velvet, under its own small lamp. The sapphire was enormous, a deep, breathtaking blue. It wasn't just a jewel, it was a legend, and Sir Alistair's most prized possession. He had, with his usual dramatic flair, told everyone at the table its long and bloody history before the meal began. The lights, run by Sir Alistair's own private generator, flickered once. A soft sound of surprise went around the table. They flickered again, longer this time. Nothing to worry about. Sir Alistair boomed. The old machine gets a cough sometimes. Jarvis, go and check it. The butler, a man so still he seemed made of stone, gave a slight nod and left the room. The lights died completely, plunging everything into a deep, total darkness for about 10 seconds. A woman gasped. A chair leg screeched on the floor. Then, with a hum, the lights came back on, steady and bright. People laughed in relief, smoothed their napkins, settled back into the light. It was Lady Celia Finch, Sir Alistair's sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued sister, who saw it first. She let out a choked cry, her fork clattering on her fine china plate. Everyone looked where her shaking finger pointed, at the sideboard. The rosewood stand was there. The black velvet cushion was there. But the magnificent blue sapphire was gone. In its place was a single perfect white gardenia, its petals smooth and mocking. Well-mannered chaos broke out. Sir Alistair roared, turning red. Guests stood up, talking over each other. They immediately searched the room and everyone in it. A frantic and useless exercise. The sapphire had vanished as if it had never been there, stolen by the very ghost some villagers said walked Ashwood's empty halls. The circle of suspects was perfect. No one had come in. No one had gone out. The dining hall doors had been shut since the meal started. The windows were locked tight against the cold autumn night. The thief, the Phantom of Ashwood, was without a doubt one of the 12 people who had been sitting at that table. The gathering of suspects. The suspects, as Chief Inspector Harold Rudge of the local police soon realized with a growing headache, were a difficult bunch, each with a motive that shone as brightly as the missing jewel. Sir Alistair Finch, the loud, generous, and deeply vain host. Rumor had it his money wasn't as solid as the walls of his house. The Star was insured for a very large sum. Lady Celia Finch, his unmarried sister, pale and watchful as a statue. She hated her brother's common new wealth and his even newer, glamorous wife. She would get to live at Ashwood if he died, but not his valuables. Madame Elara Finch, Sir Alistair's second wife, a stunning, mysterious Belgian widow 30 years younger. Her past was a closed book, and her marriage had people talking from London to Brussels. What did she really want with an older English gentleman? Major Reginald Fitz-Carlton, a retired army man, red-faced and bristling with old-fashioned ideas of honor. He was Sir Alistair's oldest friend and, it was quietly known, his biggest debtor. The Major's own finances were in bad shape. Miss Vivian Fitz-Carlton, the Major's daughter, a cool, modern young woman with short hair and a direct stare. She was a trained gemologist, just back from studying jewels in India. She had examined the star with professional interest that very afternoon. Dr. Alistair Penrose, the local doctor, a quiet, noticing man with gentle hands who knew everyone's secrets and ailments. He treated the Finch family, including Sir Alistair's heart trouble. He was also, quietly, in love with Lady Celia, Mr. and Mrs. George Holloway, the new money neighbors from the next county. He was in business, terribly common. She was obsessed with shiny things. They had worked hard for an invitation. Mrs. Holloway had not stopped talking about the sapphire all evening. Miss Letitia Prism, a nervous, fading woman who acted as Lady Celia's companion. She jumped at shadows and saw too much. She owed money to a lender in London, a fact she thought was hidden. Reverend Arthur Pettigrew, the village priest, a truly good man with empty pockets. His church roof was falling in, a project Sir Alistair had promised, but kept putting off. Jarvis, the butler, emotionless, perfect at his job. He had been at Ashwood for 20 years. His loyalty was absolute, but his sick sister needed medical care he couldn't afford on his salary. And finally, Miss Emily Wainwright, a smart young secretary from Sir Alistair's London office, down for the weekend to deal with some urgent contracts. She was an outsider, watching the rich people's party with a mix of fascination and sharp understanding. Chief Inspector Rudge, a practical man who believed in fingerprints and footmarks, was stuck. The room told him nothing. No secret panels, no marks on the windows. The gardenia was from the flower arrangements all over the house. Every guest and servant had been sitting down during the blackout. They all alibied each other, which meant no one had an alibi. The Star of Kashmir, worth a fortune, had turned to air. It was Dr. Penrose who made the suggestion as the sun came up. He stood in the library with Rudge and a exhausted Sir Alistair. "There is a man," he said softly. "A contact of mine from London, a specialist in unusual problems. He has a very orderly mind. I have seen him untangle knots much worse than this." Sir Alistair waved a tired hand. "Another detective? We have detectives." He glared at Rudge. "Not like this one," Penrose said firmly. "He is Belgian. His name is Hercule Poirot." 2 days later, a taxi dropped off a very particular man at the front steps of Ashwood Manor. Hercule Poirot got out with the care of a man stepping onto thin ice. He was dressed with extreme precision, a black overcoat, shining leather shoes, and a perfectly tied grey silk scarf. His egg-shaped head was topped with a hat set at just the right angle. His famous moustache was waxed to 2 sharp points. He stood for a moment, his dark, bright eyes studying the front of the house, the long driveway, the distant lake. He did not see a pretty view. He saw a landscape of possibilities. Chief Inspector Rudge, who had come out to meet him, tried to hide his disappointment. "This fancy little man? This foreigner, Mr. Poirot? I'm Chief Inspector Rudge. Dr. Penrose thought you might help." Poirot's eyes met his, and Rudge had the sudden, uncomfortable feeling he had been completely seen and understood. "Good day, Inspector. You are puzzled, yes? The phantom, he leaves no trail, only a flower. It is interesting. Well, it's a locked room mystery, that's for sure. But we deal in facts here, Mr. Poirot, not ghosts." "Yes," Poirot said, a small smile appearing as he started up the steps. "The facts. They are so stubborn. And so often, they tell lies. It is the psychology that whispers the truth. The mind, Inspector. The little grey cells. They are what we must use." He stopped at the front door, his gaze sweeping over the grand entrance hall inside, already noting where the doors were, how the light fell, the expression on the face of the butler Jarvis, who waited in silence. "Now," said Hercule Poirot, stepping neatly into the house. "Let us begin. First, I must see where this remarkable disappearance took place. And then I must meet these people who had dinner with a phantom. The stage is set. It is time for Hercule Poirot to learn about the players in this game. Poirot began, as he always did, with order. He requested the use of the library, a room of silent, leather-bound wisdom, and made it his command post. His first action was to send the startled Chief Inspector Rudge to fetch a detailed floor plan of the manor's ground floor and a list of every person in the house, guests and staff, with their full names and their exact seat at the dining table that fateful evening. "You want a seating chart?" Rudge asked, his tone hovering between disbelief and annoyance. "But certainly," Poirot said, settling himself into a high-backed chair and meticulously aligning a porcelain ashtray with the corner of the desk. "The geography of a crime. It is paramount. Who could see what? Who was shielded by whom? This is not a random scattering of people. It is a deliberate arrangement. The Phantom, he would have needed to know this geography very well." While Rudge went off, muttering, Poirot embarked on a slow, deliberate tour of the crime scene. The dining hall was now just a grand, empty room, the sideboard bare except for a faint dust outline where the sapphires display stand had been. He did not crawl on the floor looking for clues. Instead, he stood at the doorway, at the head of the table, at the foot of the table, and at each guest's assigned seat, his eyes missing nothing. He tested the lock on the windows. He measured the distance from the table to the sideboard with his precise, short steps. 20 paces for a man with long legs, he murmured to himself. Perhaps 25 for a lady in an evening gown. In complete darkness, over an unfamiliar floor, with others listening, a risky sprint. His attention was caught by the great stone fireplace. He examined the hearth, then looked up the flue, his expression thoughtful. Rudge returned with the floor plan and a roughly drawn seating chart. Poirot took them with a grateful nod and spread them on the desk, weighing down the corners with books. He studied them for a full 5 minutes of profound silence. "Now, Inspector," he said at last, "we will speak to people. But not in the haphazard way. There is an order to the mind. And so there is an order to the interview. We will begin with Sir Alistair." Sir Alistair Finch was found in his study, fortifying himself with a large brandy. He looked older than his years, the bluster drained away, leaving a tired, worried man. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, not bothering to rise. "Penrose says you're a miracle worker. I hope he's right. That stone, it's more than just a gem." "Tell me of its value, Sir Alistair," Poirot said, taking a seat. "Beyond the monetary." Sir Alistair swirled his brandy. "It's my legacy. Proof the Finches can own and keep something truly magnificent. It's fully insured, of course, with Lloyd's. But the money isn't the point. The loss is. The humiliation." Poirot watched him carefully. "The lights. They fail often? The generator is old. It happens once in a while. A quick flicker. Never a full blackout that long before. Jarvis usually resets a breaker and it's done. And where is this generator? In the old ice house, down by the lake. Jarvis would have had to go out the kitchen door, across the terrace, and down the path. A 3-minute walk each way, at least, so the darkness was guaranteed for a minimum of 6 minutes. Interesting. Poirot made a note. And the gardenia, a signature perhaps? A damned insult is what it is. Sir Alistair slammed his glass down. That's what this phantom does. Leaves a flower. Like a calling card. It's theatrical nonsense. Poirot next asked to see Lady Celia Finch. She received him in her small, overly warm sitting room, surrounded by needlepoint and the faint smell of lavender. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. "You are the detective from the continent," she stated. Her eyes were sharp, bird-like, and held no warmth. "I am Hercule Poirot, at your service, madame. You were the first to see the theft. I have always had excellent sight, and I was looking directly at the sideboard when the lights returned. That woman my brother married was cooing about the stone just before the lights failed. She has a fascination with shiny objects. Rather primitive. Madame Elara, who else? She brings a foreign atmosphere into this house. One doesn't know what to think. The disapproval was icy. And the gardenia, mademoiselle? Does it mean something to you?" For a fraction of a second, her tightly held composure slipped. A flicker of something raw. Fear? Recognition? Passed behind her eyes. It was gone instantly. "It is a common flower. There were several arrangements in the hall that night. Anyone could have picked one. But to do so in the dark, and to place it with such precision," Poirot mused. "It suggests a certain nerve, does it not?" Lady Celia's lips pinched together. "I know nothing about nerve, Monsieur Poirot, only about right and wrong." His third interview was with Madame Elara Finch. She chose the morning room, full of light, and she was like a sleek cat sunning itself on the chaise lounge. She was indeed beautiful, with a composed, watchful stillness that matched Poirot's own. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her English perfect but softly accented, a fellow Belgian in this English wilderness. "It is a comfort. The comfort, madame, is mine. This must be a distressing time. Your husband's treasure, gone." She gave an elegant slight shrug. "It is a stone. Alistair is more distressed than I. He sees it as part of himself. I see it as a thing. A beautiful thing, but a thing. It can be replaced." "With the insurance money?" Poirot asked lightly. Her eyes met his, unflinching. "If it is not found, that is the procedure, is it not?" The gardenia left in its place. A romantic gesture, perhaps, or a cruel one. For the first time, her mask of calm showed a crack. A tiny, impatient exhale. "It is melodrama, this phantom idea. It is someone in this house playing a nasty, greedy game. The flower is meant to confuse, to make the simple act of theft seem like a ghost story." She leaned forward slightly. "You would do better, Monsieur Poirot, to look at the people who need money, not those who appreciate beauty." Poirot thanked her and left. Standing in the grand hallway, he reviewed his notes. 3 interviews, 3 different reactions to the same flower, a symbol of insult, a common object, a tool of misdirection. The phantom had not just stolen a sapphire, Poirot reflected. He or she had planted an idea, and it was in the garden of conflicting ideas that the truth would eventually grow. He adjusted his perfectly straight tie and went to find Chief Inspector Rudge. It was time to hear about alibis, movements, and the one thing everyone insisted was impossible: how a large sapphire could vanish from a locked room in the space of 10 dark seconds. Poirot found Chief Inspector Rudge in the butler's pantry, going over the servants' statements for the 3rd time. "They're a closed lot," Rudge grumbled. "All loyal to the house, or scared of losing their positions. They say the same thing: no one left the kitchen hallway during the blackout. Except for Jarvis, who went to the generator," Poirot said. "Right. And his story checks out. The cook saw him leave and return, muddy at the shoes. The path to the ice house is all wet clay, but the theft did not happen outside, Inspector. It happened in here." Poirot's eyes swept the domestic hallway. "I will speak to Jarvis now." The butler was in the dining hall, restoring the room to order with silent efficiency. He did not startle when Poirot addressed him. "Monsieur Poirot, how may I assist?" "A question of timing, Mr. Jarvis. The lights failed. Sir Alistair asked you to see to them. You left immediately?" "I did, sir." "Did you, in that moment before you left, hear anything? A quick movement? A rustle of fabric?" Jarvis's expression remained a polite blank. The room was in surprise, sir. General murmur. I could not pick out any specific sound. And the gardenia on the sideboard. When you first saw it, did it strike you as fresh? This finally produced a reaction. A slight pause. I am no florist, sir. But the petals were firm, not wilted. It had not been picked long. Merci. Poirot moved to the sideboard. Show me exactly how the display was arranged. Jarvis demonstrated, his hands steady. The lamp was here. The velvet pad was centered so. The stone sat thus, and when you returned, after resetting the generator, the stone was gone, and the flower was here? Poirot pointed to the center of the velvet. Not quite in the center, sir, Jarvis corrected quietly. It was placed slightly off to the left, as if put down in haste. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A detail overlooked. Off to the left. Which is the side nearest the fireplace, is it not? It is, sir. Poirot thanked him and moved next to the fireplace, running a hand over the sootless marble mantel. His fingers traced a nearly invisible seam in the interior brick. A secret compartment? Too obvious. But the hearth was clean, too clean, as if recently swept. He next requested the presence of Miss Vivian Fitzcarlton. He received her in the library, where she sat with the posture of someone awaiting a business meeting. You are an expert with gems, mademoiselle. I am, she said. No false modesty. You handled the star that afternoon. Your opinion of it? It is exceptional. A true cashmere sapphire, untreated. Its value is primarily historic and artistic. The insurance value is dramatic, but a collector would pay more. Her voice was cool, factual. Could such a stone be easily sold? Not through any legitimate channel. It is famous. One would need to break it up, which would destroy most of its value, or have a very private, very crooked buyer waiting. She met his gaze. This was not a theft for the open market. It was either for a specific collector or for the insurance payout. And the method? In the dark, a slight frown crossed her modern, practical face. That is the puzzle. I have recreated it in my mind. The distance, the obstacles, the risk of noise. I do not see how it was done, unless there was an accomplice, or the stone was moved before the lights went out. Poirot leaned forward. Before? But everyone saw it, did they? She counted. They saw a blue glitter under a lamp, in a reflective setting. A skilled illusionist, or a clever person, could create a substitute. A piece of glass. The true theft could have happened earlier. The blackout was just the reveal. It was a compelling theory. Poirot felt the stirring of his little gray cells. The false lead was presenting itself, wrapped in logic. The authorities would cling to this, an earlier, simpler theft. But the gardenia, placed in the dark, argued against it. Why take that risk if the crime was already done? He ended the interview and walked to the window. The case was arranging itself into layers, like an onion. The obvious layer, a desperate grab in the dark. The second layer, a cunning switch earlier in the day. But Poirot sensed a third, deeper truth, hidden beneath the theatrical gesture of a single, white flower. The false lead, when it came, was delivered with triumphant satisfaction by Chief Inspector Rudge later that afternoon. He found Poirot in the library, meticulously reviewing the seating chart. Poirot, I think we've got it. It's the Holloways. Has to be. Poirot looked up, his expression neutral. Indeed, this is progress. What has illuminated them for you? The maid who cleans their room, Rudge said, lowering his voice. She found this, tucked under the lining of Mrs. Holloway's jewelry case. He held up a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a single dazzling diamond earring. It's a perfect match for the one she was wearing at dinner. Her left ear was bare when the lights came back on. She claimed the clasp was loose, that it must have fallen in the dark and she couldn't find it, and you believe she did not lose it, but used it? Poirot asked. Think about it. In the dark, she feels her way to the sideboard. She's obsessed with the thing. She snatches the sapphire, but in her nervousness, her earring catches on the velvet or something and is torn off. She doesn't notice in the panic and the dark. Later, she hides it. It's physical evidence, man. Solid proof she was at the scene during the blackout. It is a fact, Poirot conceded. And what of the gardenia? A diversion. She probably had it tucked in her sleeve. A bit of theater to throw us off the scent. It worked for a while, and the method? The distance from her seat to the sideboard? She was seated on the right side, 3 chairs down from Sir Alistair. It's a clear path if everyone is sitting still, stunned by the dark. She's a greedy woman, Poirot. Motive and opportunity. Her husband's finances are shaky, for all their show. They need a windfall. Poirot placed his fingertips together. You have questioned her again? Not yet. Wanted to tell you first, but I'm ready to bring her in for formal questioning. This, combined with her constant gushing over the jewel, her nouveau riche desperation to be part of this set, it paints a clear picture. To Rudge's surprise, Poirot did not share his enthusiasm. The little detective rose and walked to the fireplace, staring into the cold grate. It paints a picture, Inspector. But is it the true one? Consider the psychology. Mrs. Holloway is a woman who craves acceptance. She would know she is an object of suspicion, of slight ridicule. To perform such a bold, risky theft in the very room where she is a marginal guest, it is possible. Yes, but would such a woman, having committed the act, be so careless as to lose a distinctive diamond earring, and then to hide it so poorly in her own room? Criminals make mistakes. That's how we catch them. Some do, Poirot agreed, but this crime, from the timing to the symbolic flower, suggests a mind that does not make simple mistakes. It is a mind that thinks several moves ahead. The lost earring, it is almost too helpful. It resolves the uncertainty we have spoken of, how someone could navigate the dark room. It provides a neat solution. You're saying it's a plant? Rudge's triumph was cooling into irritation. I am saying it is a fact that must be integrated with all other facts, not used to eclipse them. The earring proves she was at the sideboard only if it was lost during the theft, but if her clasp was genuinely faulty, as she claims, it could have been lost earlier, when she leaned over to admire the stone before dinner. Someone else could have found it and placed it there later. Rudge scoffed. That's awfully convoluted. Is it? Poirot's eyes were bright. This phantom enjoys theater. What is more theatrical than framing the obvious suspect? It brings the investigation to a neat, satisfying close. Everyone believes the vulgar outsider is guilty. The true culprit sighs in relief. The chief inspector shook his head, the solid weight of the evidence bag in his hand feeling more convincing than Poirot's abstractions. With respect, Monsieur Poirot, my job is to follow the evidence. This is the first real break we've had. I'm bringing Mrs. Holloway in. Poirot gave a small, resigned nod. By all means, question her. The exercise will be most instructive. But, if you will permit a suggestion, do not reveal you have found the earring. Observe her. See if she volunteers the story of the loose clasp. The psychology. Inspector, watch for it. As Rudge left, determined to secure a confession, Poirot returned to his seat. The Holloway solution was tidy. It would please Sir Alistair and the insurance company. It would allow everyone to return to their lives, but it was wrong. Hercule Poirot could feel it in his bones. The phantom was still here, watching, perhaps even amused by this turn of events. The case was not closing. It was merely entering a new, more deceptive chapter. True to his word, Chief Inspector Rudge took Mrs. Georgina Holloway into the study for what he termed a clarifying chat. From the hallway, Poirot observed the beginning of the performance through the slightly ajar door. Mrs. Holloway, a woman built of nerves and feathers, entered with an air of offended dignity. Her husband, a florid man who seemed to sweat apology, was instructed to wait outside. Poirot did not linger to eavesdrop. He had his own performance to stage. He sought out the quietest members of the household, those overshadowed by more forceful personalities. He found Miss Letitia Prism arranging dahlias in the conservatory, her fingers trembling as she snipped a stem. "Ah, mademoiselle." A tranquil pursuit amidst such turmoil. She jumped, nearly dropping her shears. "Monsieur Poirot, you startled me." "1,000 pardons. I come only to admire the flowers. The gardenias, for instance. Where do they grow?" She pointed a wavering finger to a corner where several lush bushes bore white blooms. "There. They are Sir Alistair's pride. He has a gift with them, so the Phantom did not have to venture far for his calling card. He could have picked it here, any time before dinner." Poirot plucked a single blossom and held it beneath his nose. "A clean, almost severe scent, do you not agree? Not romantic? Funereal, perhaps?" Miss Prism paled. I wouldn't know." "Of course. You were seated next to Lady Celia. I see. A good friend?" "A kind employer," she corrected hastily. "She has been very good to me during the blackout." "Did you hold on to her? For comfort, as women do?" I think I may have grasped her arm. It was so frighteningly dark. And did she grasp yours in return?" The companion's eyes darted like trapped birds. No, her hands were on the table, I believe. She was very still. Always so still. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." His next encounter was with Reverend Pettigrew, who was pacing the gravel drive as if it were the nave of his church. Poirot fell into step beside him. "A heavy burden, Reverend, to see discord among your flock. A terrible burden. Monsieur Poirot, theft is a violation of the 8th commandment. But to sow such suspicion, it is a violation of Christian charity." "The flower," Poirot said abruptly. "In your extensive readings, does the gardenia carry a symbolic meaning? Beyond the merely floral?" The Reverend slowed his pace. "It is not a flower with strong biblical significance. In the secular language of flowers, it can mean secret love or 'I dream of you.'" He said it with mild distaste, rather theatrical for a thief. "Or perfectly precise," Poirot murmured. He changed tack. "The generator failure. You heard Sir Alistair say it happens occasionally. Did it happen the last time you dined here?" Pettigrew frowned, searching his memory. "You know, I don't believe it did. Not for months. The last time was, well, it was shortly after Madame Alara arrived. A fault was found and fixed, or so we were told." Poirot's eyes glittered. A fact, small and seemingly disconnected. He stored it away. Finally, he orchestrated a chance meeting with Major Fitz-Carlton, finding him in the billiard room, restlessly chalking a cue. "Major, a question of logistics," Poirot began, bypassing pleasantries. "You are a man of action. In your estimation, could a person cross that dining hall in utter blackness without striking a chair or causing a commotion?" The Major snorted. "A trained person? Possibly, but not some fainting society woman. You'd need a clear head, a knowledge of the terrain, and ice in your veins. If you ask me, Rudge is barking up the wrong tree with that Holloway woman. She'd have squealed like a stuck pig if she'd bumped into anything. Then who in this company possesses such nerve?" Fitz-Carlton leaned on his cue, his gaze growing distant. "A soldier, a surgeon, a cool-headed servant. Or," he added, his voice dropping, "someone who has faced darker things than a parlor game. Someone like our Belgian hostess. Continental sorts can be formidable." With that, he lined up a shot, the crack of the balls echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. Poirot returned to the library, his psychological soundings complete. He had stirred the still waters and observed the ripples. Fear from the companion, a useful memory from the rector, a pointed opinion from the soldier. Each reaction was a brushstroke on the canvas of the crime. Down the hall, the door to the study opened. Chief Inspector Rudge emerged, his expression no longer triumphant, but puzzled and frustrated. Mrs. Holloway swept out behind him, not in tears, but in a state of high indignation. "Well?" Poirot asked calmly. Rudge ran a hand through his hair. She volunteered the story of the loose clasp before I even mentioned the earring, insisted she'd searched everywhere for it. When I suggested she might have lost it at the sideboard, she looked genuinely confused, then outraged. It wasn't the reaction of a guilty woman covering her tracks. It was the reaction of a vain woman annoyed her jewelry had failed her. Poirot offered a small, knowing smile. "The psychology, Inspector. It is a compass, and it tells us we are not yet pointing north." The false lead had been exposed, not by disproving the evidence, but by the human response to it. The game was now truly afoot. The false lead of Mrs. Holloway's earring deflated like a pricked balloon. By dinner that evening, a sullen tension had replaced the earlier climate of suspicion. The Holloways, exonerated but deeply humiliated, took their meal in their room. The remaining guests picked at their food, eyeing one another with renewed unease. The phantom, it was clear, was still among them. It was just after 10 o'clock when the new development occurred. A piercing scream, thin and sharp as broken glass, sliced through the manor's upper floor. It came from the east wing. Poirot, who had been in the library with Chief Inspector Rudge and Dr. Penrose reviewing timelines, was the first into the hallway. He was followed closely by the two men and a pale, startled Jarvis. The scream had drawn others: Sir Alistair, Lady Celia, Madame Elara. The sound had emanated from Lady Celia's suite. The door to the sitting room was open. Inside, Miss Letitia Prism stood swaying, one hand clutching the doorframe, the other pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. Before her, on a small writing desk, a single white gardenia lay atop a scattered pile of letters. It was just here," she stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the flower. "I came in to fetch my embroidery and it was lying there, on my private correspondence." Lady Celia pushed forward, her face like stone. "A flower? Is that all? You screamed like a banshee for a flower, Letitia?" "Not just the flower," Miss Prism cried. Her composure shattered. "Look at it, the stem is broken short, just like the one left with the sapphire." Jarvis described it. "This is a message. A threat." She began to weep, harsh, gasping sobs. "He knows I saw something. He knows." Poirot moved swiftly to the desk. He did not touch the gardenia, but bent close. The stem was indeed snapped cleanly, not cut, just as Jarvis had described the first one. He looked at the letters beneath it. They were mostly mundane: a bill from a dressmaker, a note from an old friend. But one, partly concealed, bore the letterhead of a London firm known discreetly as purveyors of loans. "What did you see, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked, his voice low and urgent. "You must tell us now." Miss Prism shook her head wildly, looking from Lady Celia's icy stare to the concerned face of Dr. Penrose. "I'm not sure, it was nothing, just a shadow. A movement in the dark during the blackout, near the fireplace. I thought it was a trick of the eyes." "Near the fireplace?" Poirot pounced on the detail. "Which side?" The left side. "As you face it." "But it was nothing. I said nothing." Her eyes fixed on the gardenia. "But he knows I might have seen. He's telling me to stay quiet. This is outrageous." Sir Alistair boomed. "Frightening women in their rooms now. "Inspector, this has gone far enough." But Chief Inspector Rudge was staring at Poirot, a new, grudging respect in his eyes. The Belgian had been right. The Phantom was not only still here, but active, confident enough to send a warning. "Everyone, out of this room, please," Rudge ordered, finding his authority. "Miss Prism, you will have protection. No one is to be alone." As the group shuffled out, murmuring fearfully, Poirot lingered. His eyes swept the room. No forced entry. The gardenia had appeared in a private space, a space only a member of the household could access without drawing immediate attention. The Phantom was not an outsider. He was, as Poirot had always believed, at the very heart of Ashwood. He looked at the terrified companion, now being led away by Dr. Penrose, who offered a supportive arm and soothing words. He looked at Lady Celia's rigid, disapproving back. He looked at the perfect, menacing white flower on the desk. The theft of the sapphire had been a calculated act of greed or necessity. This was different. This was an act of psychological terror. The game had changed. The Phantom was no longer just a thief. He was a puppeteer, playing on the fears of the household. And in doing so, Poirot reasoned, he had just made his first significant mistake. He had moved from a perfect passive crime to an active, risky one. He had shown a piece of his hand, a need to control, to silence. And in his haste, he might have left a new kind of clue. Not a physical one, but a behavioral one. The target, Miss Prism, and the location, her private desk, spoke volumes. Poirot's mind raced, aligning this new fact with the old. The Phantom was someone who knew the household routines intimately, someone who could move unseen, and someone who was deeply, personally threatened by what a nervous woman might have seen near the fireplace in the dark. After the disturbance, Poirot requested complete solitude in the dining hall. The room was now a silent witness, holding its breath. He dismissed the constable at the door and stood alone in the vast space, his eyes closed not in prayer, but in reconstruction. He replayed the sequence, as described by everyone. The flicker, the second flicker, the command to Jarvis, the final, complete blackout, the 10 seconds of darkness, the return of light, the discovery. His mind snagged on a single, previously unexamined detail. It was a tiny contradiction, a psychological pebble in the smooth shoe of the narrative. He opened his eyes and walked slowly to the fireplace. The left side. Miss Prism had seen a movement near the fireplace's left side during the blackout. Jarvis had noted the gardenia was placed slightly to the left on the velvet cushion. These were not proofs, but they were alignments. His eyes traveled up the elaborate marble mantelpiece to the large, gloomy oil painting that hung above it, a dramatic seascape in a heavy gilt frame. He rang for Jarvis. When the butler appeared, Poirot did not ask about the night of the theft. Instead, he pointed to the painting. "This is a formidable piece. It must be difficult to clean." "It is, sir. The frame is dusted weekly, but the canvas itself is only attended to by a specialist from London once a year. It was last done in September." So, before Madame Elara's arrival, Poirot noted, almost to himself, "Tell me, Jarvis, on the night of the dinner, was this painting perfectly straight?" The butler's impeccable composure faltered for a second. I could not say for certain, sir. My attention was on the sideboard and the guests." "Of course. And the generator. When it failed in the past, was it always Jarvis who reset it?" "Always, sir. I am familiar with the mechanism." "And how long did it usually take?" "From the moment you left the room to the moment the lights returned. 2 minutes, perhaps 3. It is a simple switch. The longer blackout was unusual." Poirot thanked him, and once alone approached the painting. He did not touch it. Instead, he examined the wall around it. the subtle pattern of the wallpaper, the dust on the mantle's top. His eyes, sharp and missing nothing, detected 2 faint parallel scratches in the dust at the mantle's far left end. Scratches that a heavy, shifted frame might make. He stepped back, a slow smile touching his lips. The hidden clue was not an object. It was an action. An action that had to have been performed, not in the 10 seconds of blackness, but during the earlier, shorter flickers. The first flicker, a surprise. The second flicker, a signal. In those 2 brief moments of dimness, while the guests were momentarily distracted, but not yet plunged into utter darkness, something had been done. The final, prolonged blackout was not the window for the theft. It was the curtain, drawn to hide what had already been accomplished. The gardenia, then, was not a daring placement in the dark. It was a calculated placement in the light, just before the lights went out for the final time. A simple, brazen act, hidden in plain sight, relying on the assumption that no one would be looking at the sideboard in the moment before darkness fell. Everyone would have been looking at their host, or their neighbor, or their plate. The method became clear. The theft required no desperate dash. It required only precise timing, a steady nerve, and a pre-planned hiding place mere steps from the thief's seat. The phantom had not moved during the long blackout. The phantom had moved before it. And the second gardenia? A panic-driven mistake. Miss Prism's vague memory of a shadow had become a lethal threat in the phantom's mind. The attempt to silence her had only served to highlight the very area of the room Poirot now scrutinized. He left the dining hall and sought out Chief Inspector Rudge. Inspector, a question of procedure. If one were to find the sapphire hidden within the very room from which it was stolen, would that not eliminate many of our practical difficulties? Rudge stared. You found it? Not yet. But I believe I know how it left the sideboard, and therefore I begin to know who made it leave. The phantom did not need to escape the room with the stone, only to hide it from a swift, superficial search. The stone is likely still within these walls. But we searched. You searched for a missing jewel. You did not search for a displaced object or a space temporarily used as a vault. Poirot's eyes were bright. We must, however, be patient. To reveal the hiding place now would be to frighten the bird away. We must allow the phantom to feel secure, even triumphant. The second flower was an act of insecurity. We must let that insecurity grow. He had the hidden clue. He understood the mechanics. Now he needed the final unassailable link between the method and the individual psychology of the culprit. The who was coming into focus, but Poirot required one more piece. The why that was personal, specific, and devastating. Only then would he call for the final gathering. The following evening, after a day of strange, quiet tension, Hercule Poirot made his request. He asked Chief Inspector Rudge to assemble everyone connected to the case in the drawing room at 9 o'clock sharp. It is time, he said simply, for the shadows to recede and the light of reason to shine. The room, usually a place of casual repose, was arranged like a stage. Chairs were drawn into a rough semicircle. Poirot had positioned himself near the fireplace, with Rudge standing sternly to his right. One by one they filed in, their faces a gallery of anticipation, anxiety, and irritation. Sir Alistair and Madame Alara entered together, she serene, he impatient. Lady Celia came alone, her back rigid, choosing a seat apart. Major Fitzcarlton and his daughter Vivian took chairs side by side, their expressions unreadable. Dr. Penrose escorted a still pale Miss Prism, finding her a sheltered spot. Reverend Pettigrew stood solemnly by the window. The Holloways, stiff with lingering offense, perched on a small sofa. Jarvis entered last, taking a respectful position near the door, the perfect observer. When the clock finished chiming the hour, Poirot took a single, precise step forward. He adjusted his cuffs and cleared his throat. The room fell absolutely silent. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice carrying clearly in the hush. "I have asked you here this evening to conclude the matter of the Star of Kashmir. The phantom, as you call this thief, is no spirit. He or she is present in this room now. A collective intake of breath, a rustle of fabric. Let us first understand what did not happen," Poirot continued. "There was no desperate scramble in the total blackout. That was a pantomime, designed to confuse. The theft was achieved with cool nerve and simple timing during the 2 brief flickers of the lights before the final failure. He saw several pairs of eyes widen. One person's hands tightened imperceptibly on the arm of a chair. The phantom," Poirot went on, "used those moments of dimness, when eyes were adjusting but the room was not yet dark, to act. The stone was taken and concealed in a hiding place, prepared in advance. The final, prolonged blackout served only one purpose: to allow the phantom to return to their seat calmly and to provide a dramatic backdrop for the discovery of the crime. The gardenia was placed on the velvet not in the dark, but in the light, just before the lights failed for the last time. A bold move, relying on the fact that no one would be looking at the sideboard at that precise second. But that's impossible." Sir Alistair burst out. "The stone was there. Was it?" Poirot asked mildly. "You saw a blue glitter under a lamp. You assumed. In magic, it is called misdirection. Here, it was psychology. The phantom counted on your assumption." He turned his gaze slowly around the circle. "The hiding place was ingenious, close, accessible, and within the thief's natural reach during those flickering moments. It is a place you have all seen, yet none of you have looked at. And," he added, his voice dropping slightly, "the sapphire is still there." This caused a genuine stir. Murmurs broke out. "Yes," Poirot said, raising a hand for quiet. "The phantom has been waiting for the search to end, for suspicion to settle elsewhere, to retrieve it at leisure. But the second gardenia, left for Miss Prism, changed that plan. It revealed a streak of panic. The phantom feared a memory, however vague. That fear has trapped them." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Every face was now turned to him, a mixture of hope, fear, and dawning comprehension in various measures. "And so," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming in the lamplight, "we come to the final question. Not of method, which I have laid bare, but of person. Who here possessed the knowledge, the nerve, the precise opportunity, and the motive that is not merely financial, but deeply, compellingly personal? In a few moments I will tell you. And I will also tell you how the simple overlooked fact of a gardenia's broken stem points directly to the heart of this drama." Poirot allowed the tension to coil to its tightest point before he spoke again. All eyes were fixed upon him. "The hiding place," he announced, "was behind the large seascape above the dining room fireplace." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. The painting, heavy and on a hook, could be tilted out from the bottom in an instant. A cavity behind it, or simply the space between canvas and wall, served as a perfect temporary vault. The faint scratches on the mantel confirm it was moved. During the first 2 flickers, the phantom rose, took the stone, and hid it there, all within a few seconds, under the cover of distracted surprise. They then returned to their seat. When the final blackout came, they merely had to place the gardenia, which they had picked earlier, upon the now empty velvet. "But that's madness," sputtered Major Fitzcarlton. "Someone would have seen them get up. Who would see?" Poirot countered. Everyone's eyes were on their host, or were momentarily dazzled by the flickering lights. It was an act of breathtaking audacity, which is why it succeeded. And it points to one whose movements would seem natural or go unremarked during such a moment. He turned his gaze, slow and deliberate, toward the quiet figure of the doctor. You, Dr. Penrose. Your seat was at the midpoint of the table's left side, a direct line to the fireplace. If you rose during a flicker, those opposite might assume you were attending to Sir Alistair, your patient. Those beside you would be looking toward the head of the table. It was the perfect position. Dr. Penrose's face remained calm, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. A fascinating theory, Monsieur Poirot. But motive? I have no need of a sapphire. Ah, but you did. Not for wealth, but for leverage. You are in love with Lady Celia. A sharp gasp came from the companion. Miss Prism. Lady Celia herself went very still, her hands frozen in her lap. You knew of her brother's financial strain. You knew he might be forced to sell Ashwood, scattering its contents and its inhabitants to the winds. You could not bear the thought of Lady Celia, the woman you hoped to marry, turned out of her home, or reduced to dependency on a sister-in-law she despises. The stone's insurance value would solve Sir Alistair's money problems, securing the house and its status quo. A stolen gem is a loss. An insured gem is a salvation. You meant for the insurance to pay. Preposterous. Sir Alistair roared, but his eyes were fixed on the doctor with dawning horror. The gardenia, Poirot pressed on, his voice cutting through the protest. It is your signature, Doctor. A flower meaning secret love, and I dream of you. A message to Lady Celia, though she did not understand it. And the stem, broken, not cut. A surgeon's habit. You snap the stem cleanly, as you would a suture, to preserve the bloom. A cutter, a pair of shears, would have bruised it. Only someone with your training would break it so. Penrose's calm finally cracked. A sheen of perspiration appeared on his brow. Circumstantial nonsense. Is it? Then explain the second gardenia. You placed it on Miss Prism's desk to terrify her into silence, because she was seated next to Lady Celia, on the fireplace's left side. In the blackout, she felt you release her arm as you leaned forward to place the flower. She mistook your movement for a shadow. You feared she might, upon reflection, realize it was not a shadow, but her neighbor, the good doctor, momentarily gone. Poirot took a final step. You engineered the longer blackout by tampering with the generator earlier that day, a simple matter for a man of science. You knew Jarvis's routine. You even suggested my involvement, not to solve the crime, but to lend credibility to the phantom story and to hasten the insurance payout once the unsolvable case was filed away. You miscalculated only in your fear for Miss Prism's memory and in your sentimental, tragic choice of flower. Dr. Alistair Penrose stood. His face was ashen, but his eyes met Poirot's. In them was not anger, but a profound, weary defeat. He did not confess. He did not need to. The truth was in the room, as solid and cold as the missing sapphire behind the painting. The stone is still there, Inspector, Poirot said softly to Rudge, without looking away from the doctor. You will find it wrapped in a piece of surgical lint, quite undisturbed. The silence that followed was the loudest sound any of them had ever heard. The silence in the drawing room was broken by a single choked sob. It came not from the condemned man, but from Lady Celia Finch. Her stony composure shattered, and she stared at Dr. Penrose with an agony of betrayal and dawning, terrible understanding. He had done this for her. The violation, the theft, the terror inflicted on Miss Prism, all spun from a twisted thread of devotion. She turned her face away, unable to bear the sight of him. Chief Inspector Rudge moved forward, his earlier frustration replaced by grim efficiency. "Alistair Penrose, I am arresting you for the theft of the Star of Kashmir. You do not have to say anything, but anything you do say may be given in evidence." Penrose offered no resistance. He held out his hands, not for handcuffs, but in a helpless, empty gesture toward Lady Celia. She did not look back. As Rudge led him from the room, the doctor's shoulders were slumped, not with the weight of guilt, but with the crushing burden of a love that had curdled into a monstrous crime. True to Poirot's word, the sapphire was found precisely where he indicated. Wrapped in sterile gauze and tucked behind the heavy frame, it gleamed undamaged, a cold prize won through hot delusion. Sir Alistair's relief was palpable, though it was tempered by the shame of his friend's betrayal and the exposure of his own financial fragility. For Miss Prism, the resolution brought a fragile peace. The phantom was flesh and blood, and in custody. The threat was gone. She would remain at Ashwood, her secret debt now a known quantity, treated with cautious pity by Lady Celia. The following morning, Poirot prepared to depart. As he stood in the great hall, fastening his gloves with meticulous care, Sir Alistair approached him, clutching a checkbook. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. Your fee, name it." Poirot held up a forestalling hand. "My fee will be sent through the usual channels, but I will accept something else." His eyes drifted to a silver vase on a side table, where a single white gardenia stood. "The symbolism of flowers is a delicate thing, Sir Alistair. They can express a secret love, or conceal a deadly one. They are not to be trifled with." He gave a final, neat bow, and turned to leave. On the threshold he paused, casting one last look around the grand wounded house. "Order," Hercule Poirot murmured to himself, stepping out into the crisp autumn air. "It is restored. But the cracks in the vase, once mended, always show." And with that, he climbed into the waiting taxi, leaving Ashwood Manor and its ghosts behind.